new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
What is up? Welcome back to Drummers on Drumming, a podcast powered by Big Fat Snare Drum. My name is Ben Hilsinger, and this week we're back with another installment of the Drum Panel. I'm joined by three returning guests. We got Brendan Buckley, a drummer and producer who has worked with artists like Shakira, Tegan and Sara, and Morrissey. We got Zack Albetta, a Broadway drummer and co-host of the Working Drummer podcast, and Eric Urrea, an independent drummer from Chicago who plays with Marina City and La Armada. This is part one of our two-part conversation, and we cover a lot of ground. We talk about why changing your mind can be a good thing, what actually helps when you're in a creative slump, and how turning your drums into your job can change your relationship with your playing. Obviously. From there, we get into live shows, backing tracks, vulnerability, and whether making a performance polished can sometimes make it feel less human. And I would say this is kind of the theme of the last few months of the podcast. So, as always, there are plenty of strong opinions and actually a few disagreements today. I got a little saucy, and there's probably more gray area than any of us expected. That is a callback. All right, let's get into it.
There are also people that love controversy.
Yeah.
Like they thrive on it. It like fills them with purpose. Mm-hmm. And then there's other people who don't.
Yeah.
I fall into that camp.
Same.
Where I couldn't be bothered being in the center of some controversial debate. But there are people that
came to the wrong podcast.
Exactly. I'll just sit back and watch. Now, the funny thing is I do have tons of opinions. But, you know, I don't voice them voluntarily. If someone asks me, sure. But it's not like I want to wake up every morning and say, hey, world, here's my take on this. Here's my take on that. Here's my take on this. It doesn't happen that way. I just feel like, you know, if someone wants to know my viewpoint on something, that's different. But I don't feel like I have to convince the world that my viewpoint is valid. It's never been a thing for me.
That brings me to think, though, the reason why I don't have huge opinions and voice them a lot is that my mind changes all the time. I can't remember the last opinion I've had on something that has been so much like, I'm going to die on this hill. It's not so much that I look down on people that like an argument and like to have opinions. I'm just in awe that they deal in absolutes and they never think their mind is ever going to change and they dig in their heels. That's so not me. But then I'm also like, am I spineless? I don't know, you know?
I feel like there's a difference between an opinion and a belief. And I think, you know, beliefs can still change. But going back to a conversation we had a while back about, you know, cynicism and negativity, like I heard someone say the other day, it's, especially when you're young, it's easier to define yourself by what you hate. And if changing your mind about something, if changing an opinion or a belief means changing something about yourself and your self-identity, like that's harder. It's easy to sort of like look at objective evidence and say, well, I'm going to think this about this now, or I'm going to believe this now. But if that means that you have to shed a part of yourself that you were like very attached to for whatever reason, that's a lot harder to do.
I agree with what you just said. I think we all have opinions. I think diversity of opinion is very beautiful. It's colorful. It makes life interesting. I think we should have different opinions. But I think when we start treating our opinions like they're facts, I think that's a problem. Mm-hmm. There are facts. The scientific method can prove something through experimentation, and then it's agreed upon throughout the world because they've tested. And then there's just an opinion I have on something. That's different. So I don't feel like I need to argue my opinion. It's never been an interest to try to convince someone that they need to have the same opinion as me, or that their opinion is wrong and mine is right. I feel like that's a silly argument that's very common on the internet. And I also agree with what you said when I was younger, when I was 14, it was very easy to say, this is cool, this sucks. Everything in my life was, this is the best, this is the worst. And I viewed everything on which side of the line does that land on. And then you get a little older and you start to see lots of gray area. And people are bored with gray area, but it's part of maturing. People are more excited with hot takes and yes or no, right, wrong. It's more clickbait. But really, I see most things with the pros and cons of every situation. It's just not as exciting. You look like a flip-flopper or something if you see both sides of an argument. But I enjoy it, actually. I like to listen to different people's opinions and say, I wonder how true that is, or how much truth is in that. I think that's a more mature way to look at a lot of scenarios or situations.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I came across to the other side by teaching. That was like my first glimpse of maybe everything's not so black and white. Maybe everything isn't shades of gray, you know? And for me, it was like seeing students that were the most heels dug in on any given topic. Just the lack of growth that they would have over a given time would be like staggering, as opposed to somebody who's more open. So for me, it was like, I view all of this stuff as like, I want to always be learning and exposing myself to new ideas, and that to me is exciting. And sometimes like the rub is an opportunity to learn, and if you approach it that way, then it's a net positive.
When you're in a creative slump, what actually helps you reset?
Listening, just reconnecting with music that inspires me. And I feel like if you're in a creative slump, it's maybe your impulse to dig in harder and play more and practice more and try to rub two sticks together and make a spark happen. But I find that just putting the sticks down and taking some time away from the drums and listening, and that makes me want to play again. And that sort of reminds me like, oh yeah, I want to go after this sound. I want to find that vibe. And it's something, I'm glad you brought it up, because it's something I need to do more. It's easy for me to have sort of music fatigue, and if I have some time to listen to something while I'm doing dishes or whatever, a lot of times it'll be a podcast, but I'm trying to carve out more time to just listen to music, either new music that I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed, holy shit, or stuff that I've listened to 1,000 times that's just so damn good that I love so much.
Can I ask you a question, Ben? Is when you say you struggle with being in a creative slump, what do you mean?
No, that's a good follow-up. I guess it's because drumming is my job. And so when I'm at home, very rarely is there a time when I'm sitting in front of the drum set that I shouldn't be working on something specific. And what I mean by that is a song, or, trying to create a new drum part for a new Eve 6 song that I have to record next week. And then I realize sometimes when I'm in these slumps that when I don't have something specifically to work on, I don't choose to go to the drum. I don't choose to go to the studio and just be Ben as a drummer. I sometimes avoid it because I don't feel like I want to go play. And maybe that's not even a creative slump. That's just I don't even know what kind of slump that is. I mean, it's not always, but I'm very aware of it sometimes. I sometimes wonder, I'm like, man, if I wasn't getting paid to do this, would I even do this thing anymore?
There's a number of reasons why we have creative blockage or slumps or things like that. And one is sometimes we busy ourselves in our lives with too many things on our to-do list, and we don't get around to being artists or creatives. We're like, well, I can't practice today because I have to take the dog to the groomer. We come up with little roadblocks along the way. So one of the things to do is to get rid of as much of those as you can, or put drumming in the forefront of that. Like, yes, I have to take the dogs for a walk, but I also have to practice for 2 hours a day because I told myself that was very important. Mm-hmm. So moving that up on the priority list is important. I agree with Zack that listening to music, any kind of music that will give you any spark, is helpful. It doesn't have to be, if you're playing with Eve 6, maybe let's not listen to that style of music. Maybe listen to something else altogether.
Yeah.
Sometimes going to the studio to practice, not your work related stuff, like, because I do that a lot. I'm like, well, I need to learn these songs for this gig, and it feels like work. Sometimes it's like, I'm just gonna go fool around in 6/8 for an hour and then leave. Just pick an objective, like a random objective. I'm gonna just jam along to this drum and bass record that's way too fast for my chops just for 30 minutes and leave. Or some weird task and you walk out feeling like you've expanded your vocabulary ever so slightly. Hanging around with inspirational people is really important.
Yes.
Like there's the Tim Ferriss quote that you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If you hang out with 5 very procrastinating human beings that aren't very inspirational, maybe you would absorb a lot of their energy. But if you're on tour with some people and every day off they're in their room writing a song or going to a museum or checking out a live show, you're like, wow, I'm kind of picking up on their vibe, that they are still interested in what's going on, either in the world around them or what they can do on a day-to-day basis. Another thing is lowering the stakes. Don't think that you have to go have an amazing practice session or you have to write the coolest drum part ever written.
Right.
You know, sometimes I get up early in the morning and I go to a coffee shop and I pull out my journal and I just write something. And it's not James Joyce. It's just some doodles or a to-do list or whatever. But just the act of writing, I forgot the author of The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron or something. But she's like, you just start the creative process every day with no judgment. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Just start your brain moving and start creating things, start exporting things from your internal to external. I mean, these are all things that I think might help, but don't listen to me. I'm not an expert.
You kind of are. What about you, Eric?
I think a big one is one that Brendan hit up on. It's that's for me, limitation is like such a huge aspect of creativity for me. So, like was mentioned earlier, just kind of like sitting in a room and picking a specific objective, or even stripping away a bunch of my kit and just leaving myself with kick, snare, hat for a few hours is just a great way to kind of keep me focused. Because a lot of times, like, it's easy for me to, and I think for most people, to just sit down behind their kit and it's just like, okay, the world is open. Right, you get that option paralysis and it's just like overwhelming, and that's to say nothing of whatever external pressures you have. So for me, yeah, just that idea of just what I can do to limit myself and be creative within a box is like something that really kind of gets my gears going. And then actually, to piggyback off something Zack said, I've normally been a way out is through type of person, where it's, if I'm feeling uninspired, I'm doubling down, I'm working harder. But recently I've been kind of practicing stepping away for a little bit. And I have realized, it doesn't matter, like listening to music is a great thing, but really just like doing some other activity and just letting myself have a day or a couple days where I just like intentionally don't touch the sticks, then I find I come back and I'm reinvigorated, re-inspired. The tide is in, you know.
Yeah, and walking away from it enables you to reapproach it with, I guess, just less pressure and more enjoyment. Because if you talk about a creative slump, to me, that implies I'm not good enough. My shit isn't cool enough. My shit isn't creative enough. You know, it's sort of, it can be about hanging a lantern on whatever deficiencies you think you have. And if you step away, or even in my case, if you're deprived of a certain way of being creative behind the drums, you can reapproach it and just say, man, I'm going to enjoy playing how I play for a minute, and I'm just going to explore that with no real agenda and no judgment. Maybe, I don't know, maybe some judgment attached to it. I'm thinking specifically about when I was home week before last. I had a week off, and you know, I've been doing this show 8 times a week for a long time now and have had next to zero chances to do or play anything else. And you know, I was home and I had this 65 Acro that I got in Rochester that I haven't really gotten to play very much. And there was like, I'm kind of obsessed with playing along with Tom Waits songs recently, because regardless of era, like a lot of Tom Waits songs don't really have drums in them. They have some janky percussion and, you know, whatever else. But like, I just did a drum cover of Eyeball Kid during the week that I was home, and I set up that Acro and I did some experimentation with some mics, and I did not reinvent the wheel. I did not break down any barriers in my playing or discover new shit. It was just like, here's a muscle I haven't gotten to flex in a while, and I love this fucking song, and I love this new snare drum, and I'm just gonna play some drums along with a song, and it was so therapeutic.
I think about a music professor I had at the University of Miami. His name was Ron Miller, talking about stepping away. And when I was going to music school, I would practice constantly because I had this inferiority complex. I need to put in more hours if I'm ever going to make it, right? And I remember at one point, he was not even the drum teacher, he was the jazz composition teacher. And he came up to me, he said, "What are you doing tonight?" Oh, he said, "What are you doing this weekend?" I'm like, "I'm just going to Friday through Sunday, just set up my drums and practice like 13 hours a day." He goes, "I'm going to give you some homework. Go see a movie."
Perfect.
And I'm like, "What? I don't have." He's like, "When was the last time you saw a movie?" I'm like, "I don't know." He goes, "That's your homework for Friday night. Go out, see a movie, come back Monday, tell me about it." And I thought that was very wise of him to tell an 18-year-old kid who was practice obsessed to live a little, take a break, live a little, and maybe that would actually influence your music a little bit. I don't know if you go see an action film or a rom-com or whatever, maybe you'll play a little differently with that little break, as opposed to just studying Tony Williams licks for 72 hours straight and then not being able to do any of them well or as good as him. And he's like, just be a human instead for a little bit. And that's important. It is important. It's music is a lot, but it's not everything.
Yeah, Billy Martin, he encouraged me, and if anyone is interested in this, go listen to Billy Martin's entire Big Fat Five, but he starts every practice off with a 5-minute free solo. And I don't do that enough. Going back to what you were saying, Zach, about playing like you for a little bit every once in a while, and I'm always trying to find ways to sound less like me, like practice this more, work on this, stop this habit, that I rarely just lean into what I sound like and have fun doing it.
And this leads to another conversation that maybe it's one of your topics, but we've talked about how certain drum chairs, whether it's on Broadway musicals or arena tours or church gigs, like agency and identity is being taken away from drummers, and many gigs are being designed so that it doesn't matter who's in that drum chair. And we can go down that road or not, but that just popped into my head.
Might as well. And so, referencing what we were talking about a few weeks ago at this point, by the time this comes out, just the status of live shows and production. And if you guys haven't listened to that conversation, please go back. I think it spanned over an episode and a half. Where do you stand on that, Zach? I mean, I have the notes of all the many texts we sent, and I was like, shut up, let's save it for the podcast. But I'll give you a prompt. Your first thing was you and Mark Stepbro, which is, he's great. He always responds to like different topics. Same with you, Brendan. I really appreciate it. And talking about more of a vulnerability aspect of it. So what was your perspective on that?
Well, the conversation we had about, and it was kind of spurred by, various hot takes on the internet about live production and how it just feels overproduced and it's on rails. And I just got to thinking and talking with Mark and other people about just this idea of vulnerability and how increased automation and digitization and isolation in live shows is enabling performers and audiences who are not comfortable with vulnerability. It's more of a safe space for them. And one of the hot takes we talked about or mentioned, live shows don't feel dangerous anymore. And we can talk about what that means, but I think the context in which it was presented was like, there's no menace, there's no danger, there's no fuck you in the show. And that's true to an extent, but the other end of that spectrum is like, there's no vulnerability, there's no intimacy, there's no humanness. I feel like I want to be vulnerable as a performer, and I want the performers that I'm watching to be vulnerable, and I want performers and audiences alike to strive for a human interactive experience. And I think the point of the hot take and our subsequent conversations is that live shows and live performances are starting to feel like more of a product and less of an experience.
Sometimes I feel playing with some of the setups I play with certain bands, there's more danger on stage because of all the things that could go wrong. Anyways, I keep talking, but Eric, yeah, go ahead.
No, I super agree with that. It's like I feel way more relaxed playing with, or I shouldn't say I feel more relaxed, but there's less anxiety when I'm playing with the hardcore band that I play with. Even though the music is way more technical and everything's like way high energy, It's just like set up and play. I did have to convince them to use in-ear monitors, which was a long conversation. But other than that, it's, quote unquote real band. We just set up amps and we just go for it. But then when I'm with my other band, Marina City, it's like everything's more quote unquote on rails, where the tracks are there and everything's really produced out. Like there's not a lot of room to stretch some things out. But with that said, in those situations, I try to make it a point to add a point in the show where there's some vulnerability, because I do think that that's a really important thing for me when I'm in control of that scenario. So like, for example, with Marina City, there's a song that I will try and include in the set where it's just the three of us, no tracks. I'll play piano poorly and sing harmonies even poorly. And it's just us, kind of stripping back everything. And I think that adds a layer when you can bring vulnerability to something that is like really highly produced and on rails. To me, that cues that to the audience that there's something more than just like the laptop that's going on stage. I think that most productions have something like that built in.
Yeah, I tend to agree with a lot of what's been said. For instance, if I watch late night television, which I don't, but if I happen to sit around and say, you know what, I'm going to see who's playing on Jimmy Fallon tonight or something, and it's a band, and immediately I can tell it's all laptop with a partially live lead vocal and nothing else, I turn it off. I race to turn it off because I'm not interested in watching that. For someone's opportunity to perform for 3 minutes on a show and they decide I'm just going to push play on a space bar and kind of mime along with that, that's so not what I'm interested in. It doesn't speak to me. I'm old enough to remember the first time I played on SNL where they didn't allow any playback back then. I thought that was so cool. Wow. They're old school NBC union guys, and they would come by and they'd look at a computer and say, "What's that?" Like, oh, that's just playing a drum loop. Let me hear it. And they'd make you play it and say, "You're not using that tonight. This is Saturday Night Live." You're like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, yes, that's so cool that they had at the time they had the power to say, "You're not using that."
Man, the Clint Eastwood on his porch, old cranky guy in me loves this.
Yeah.
I fucking love this.
Anyway, my point is, I'm digressing, but my point is that I think there is a lot of nuance and, hate to say it, gray area in this argument, where what are we talking about? Are we just talking about pop, like highly produced pop, or that pop rock that's kind of sort of rock, but really it's a pop show, or just music in general? Because if you go see an avant-garde jazz trio and they just do nothing but make up stuff for an hour and a half straight, that's pretty creative and that's ballsy, and there's nothing prepared about that. Or if you go see an orchestra that's playing a classic Beethoven or Mozart or Tchaikovsky piece, they're not improvising at all. They're playing the notes on a page and they're following a conductor, but it's exciting because there's humans doing it and you're listening to a classic piece. You see a punk rock band playing and you're just more thinking, is that singer going to jump off the stage and crack his head open or not? Is the guitarist and bassist, are they going to get in a fist fight on stage? There's exciting things there too to watch beyond the music. And yeah, then you go see a really highly produced pop show and you're wondering, did they just start and it's exactly scripted for an hour and 38 minutes? Or is there any element of danger in this at all? For the audience, of course, like you said, Ben, for the band, there's always things that can go wrong every night. But for the audience, are they feeling anything? That can sometimes be engineered. Just like when you go see a Cirque du Soleil show, there's danger built in just with the stunts. Like, oh, was that juggler going to drop the balls, or is that guy going to fall off the trapeze? There's danger built in there. But it's scripted. I think, yeah, there's this whole wide array of improvisation, off the script style approach to arranging music. And I think it's everything in between.
I'm so glad you brought up the classical example, because I was thinking about that earlier today. You know, when you go see an orchestra or a symphony, you know, that performance is as on rails as the Broadway musical that I'm doing, right? There's no click, there's no backing tracks, but like there are notes on a page, and there is the way that they have rehearsed this, and there is the way that the conductor is directing this. And, you know, there might be slight variances from night to night. I think most orchestras, you know, they prepare a program and they play it a few times. It's not like a one-off. They do a weekend of those pieces, but that still feels like an organic human emotional experience and not like a product. And this runs the gamut across genres and across, you know, it's unrealistic to expect Katy Perry to be Tracy Chapman, you know, and it's unrealistic to expect the New York Philharmonic to be Miles Davis, you know. So there's like sort of this X and Y axis of automation versus improvisation, or sort of, like you said, scripted moments versus spontaneity. And I think few musical acts and few musical productions exist in one extreme or the other. Again, like we've been talking about, there's gray area, and most acts exist somewhere in the middle. But when it starts feeling too produced, and when I'm hearing a bunch of shit that I'm not seeing, you know, that's when it's like, okay, this isn't even really you guys. I was talking with a friend the other night about how I see it as a possibility where my job currently, playing on a Broadway musical, could eventually become like remote to the point where I'm playing a show at home and, you know, the show is happening in Dallas. And so like there's that possibility, but I think the more realistic possibility is that, you know, the humans are eliminated from the band in general, and it's already starting to happen. And my buddy was like, yeah, that's when it just becomes high-end karaoke. And the idea of a production becoming high-end karaoke is not just germane to Broadway and musical theater. I think more and more productions are starting to feel more like high-end karaoke, and this is like you and your laptop and maybe one other human. And I'm hearing a lot of music, but I'm not seeing a lot of musicians.
Well, I think when we are trying to find reasons and point fingers to different kinds of trends, we have to think about supply and demand. And we're just drummers supplying music, but it's the demand of the audience. And if an audience wants high-end karaoke and they're willing to pay a lot of money for that, then they're going to get that. But if an audience wants a human experience with excitement and they want to be moved and they don't know what to expect and things like that, then they might want more of a human element. So I think it's really up to the audience at that point. It's up to us to guide them a little bit or provide it, but really, if all they want is push play and go, then that's what they'll get. And then they'll be the people who want something else. They want to go see something that's like, man, it blew my mind. I saw Guar and someone like got shot with this and fell off and got eaten by a monster. It was insane. I sent a video to Eric not too long ago, but I'm a giant Nine Inch Nails fan. I've said that before, but I remember seeing the Fragile tour. Of course, that is a band that has a lot of electronics going on, a lot of click tracks going on. And at the same time, it was an arena show, I remember. The production was insane. The video walls, the arrangements, the performance of everyone on stage. The drummer at the time was Jerome Dillon, I think his name was. He was smoking. And I remember there were times where like Trent pushed the guitarist, Robin Fink, off the stage into the audience when he wasn't even looking. He just fell into the audience. That could have been bad.
Yeah.
He grabbed a big bottle of water and poured it all over the keyboardist's keyboard rig. And I'm like, okay. All sorts of things getting like, you know, chaos amongst this heavily structured show. And I'm like, this is awesome. Because it's obviously they probably spent 3 months rehearsing this and working out all the kinks. And now they're trying to throw wrenches in the gears. They're trying to mess it up and to see what's going to happen, you know? It was exciting, you know? And I don't know if the next night was better or worse, but the show I saw was tops. It was insane. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy how they can kind of straddle that line of being, you know, very current, and it sounded incredible and the playing was sick. Yet I was like, we could have a blackout right now, or someone could get stitches. I don't know what's going on. So they figured it out, how to do it. And I think every artist is different, but they can all figure out a way to say, how can I make my show even more exciting? How can I make my show more interesting, more intriguing, more moving for the audience. And it could be, I'm going to add 16 more tracks to my computer, which, you wouldn't like, Zach. Or someone could say, we're going to go, well, everyone does the little B stage acoustic number where they can kind of settle down and get intimate with the audience. That's become kind of cliche, but everyone does that. And I was even joking about I can often tell when the artist is just kind of talking off the cuff in between songs, or they're saying the same story every night that they've rehearsed,
Right.
I love it when I hear artists just kind of rambling with the audience, kind of like a comedian does crowd work. I'm like, that's so impressive that they have the confidence to just say, where are you from? Or I'm glad to be here in Minneapolis, blah, blah, blah. And they talk about that for a little while or whatever. I think it's great.
And it's not just confidence. I would argue that's a form of vulnerability.
Of course.
Because we think of vulnerability as opening yourself up to attack, opening yourself up to criticism, allowing a weakness to show and to be exposed in some way that poses a danger to you. And it's definitely that. But vulnerability also means just simply showing something that is true about yourself, not hiding behind something, whether it's technology or a literal mask, or just having the confidence, like you said, to say, this is who I am, this is what I look like, this is how I sound, this is how I want to make music. And going back to your point about what's our responsibility as performers, how do we balance sort of delivering what audiences want with actually telling them what they want? Because I don't believe that a lot of audiences are saying we want more automation, we want more backing tracks, we want every show we see to be on a click track. Nobody is saying that. These are things that we have sort of imposed on ourselves in order to deliver a more consistent product or a more exciting product. And I think too many artists are going that way instead of saying how can we deliver this music in the way that we really want to? What is putting pressure on ourselves versus responding to what audiences really want? Do we have to recreate these songs exactly how they sound on the record? Are very many audience members really going to be pissed and disappointed and ask for their money back if they hear a version of this song that doesn't have those backing strings in it? Is there a version of this song with 2-part harmony instead of 4-part harmony that they will still enjoy? We just assume that everything has to be there in order for the audience to be satisfied, and I don't think it's true at all.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest part for me is I think that a lot of people assume that the audience is stupid or that the audience is being tricked. And I personally, maybe I'm naive, but I think that the audience can suss out this kind of thing, kind of going back to the rawness of Saturday Night Live, look at the popularity of NPR Tiny Desk. That has broken bands in recent years. Bands have literally gotten massively successful because of their Tiny Desk performance, and that's specifically designed to be a very similar thing. No tracks, there's, whether the audience knows it explicitly or not, they do crave that vulnerability. And I think that the artists that generally stay successful and keep longevity are able to at least merge both things. The Nine Inch Nails example is so perfect because it's, such a pristinely orchestrated show, but it's also chaotic and raw and visceral,
Your point about not giving audiences enough credit is a great one, and it reminded me of a night on the Ain't Too Proud tour in Detroit when, most Broadway shows have automation that moves shit around the stage, getting props on and off and set pieces and whatever. There's automation attached to it. And one night in Detroit, our automation went down before the show. They tested it before the show and it was shit, it's not working. And they thought about canceling the show, but what actually happened was the actors did a different version of the show. And they told the audience this. Our stage manager came out and said, here's what's going on. You are going to see a different version of this show tonight. There are going to be very few set pieces. There are going to be very few costume changes. It is going to be a stripped down version of this show. If you would like to leave now, we will refund your ticket. If you stay for this show and you do not enjoy it, we will refund your ticket. But here's what's happening tonight. Here we go. And all of the actors came out and sat in a semicircle. They set up chairs on the stage and they all sat in a semicircle. And as their scenes came up and as their characters came up, they would just stand up and go do the scene, and they would have maybe like a handheld prop, and they did a shitload of miming. And the music and the choreography happened pretty much in the same way, but all of their scenes were like no props, no costumes. They had to make it a different thing on that night. And there were 2,000 people in the Fisher Theater, and 20 of them asked for their money back. The show was just a completely different animal, and it was so fucking cool, and everybody loved it, audiences and performers alike. So I just tell that story to sort of prove Eric's point that like audiences are really open to a lot more than you think they are.
And I'd argue that maybe that was the best show.
Dude, it was so cool.
Maybe that's the one that everyone talked about and said, you should have seen the one I saw. I saw the coolest one.
Totally. And it's one of the few shows that I remember specifically from that tour. Like I remember a few shows for a few reasons, but I remember that one. Because everybody on stage was so vulnerable. They didn't know exactly what the fuck they were going to do. They knew the lines they had to say and the songs they had to sing, but they had to figure out a different way to do it. And they all did it with, improvisation and openness and curiosity and creativity. And it was just a really memorable show.
I remember once I was on tour with Tegan and Sara. They're twin sisters, but actually they alternate like who's the lead singer in each song. They don't do like 2-part harmony the whole way like Everly Brothers. So there's the Sara songs and the Tegan songs, right? And I remember Tegan had really bad like throat infection. And we were thinking about canceling, and she was like talking like this in the dressing room. I don't know what to do. And we're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know, more tea, more steam. I don't know what we're going to do tonight. And then she's like, well, let me go out and ask the audience what they want. And she went out. It's like, I can't really speak for my songs. How about, would you mind if I just sang the first line and you sang the rest?
Wow.
And they're like, yeah. So we played the show where Sara sang her songs, and every song that Tegan sang lead vocal, she would just sing the first line, and then it just became a chorus of fans singing all the lyrics, kind of like supporting her. And I think they loved the opportunity to do that. And I think they saw, again, catchphrase, vulnerability of the artist, and said, wow, this is cool. I'm seeing a special show where they could have bailed on us, but she's deathly ill and she's still on stage doing this performance for us, so let's all sing along together. And it was kind of special, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using Isotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at isotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye.
I see you.
Avatar: Fire and Ash is now streaming on Disney+. It's the film critics are calling the best Avatar yet.
Go, 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 go!
A true epic and completely jaw-dropping.
This is the only pure thing in this world.
Return to Pandora on Disney+.
It will be an adventure for the whole family.
And watch the Oscar-winning phenomenon at home.
This is sick!
Avatar: Fire and Ash, now streaming on Disney+. Rated PG-13.